Tonight's opening shot, there's a road I'd like to tell you about, lives in my hometown. DuSable Lakeshore Drive, the road is called, and it'll take you up or down. Those are the words of the great 70s one-hit wonder band Alyota Haynes and Jeremiah, their classic song, Lakeshore Drive. But a group of transit activists were singing a different tune this week.
Hey, hey, ho, ho, this lakefront highway's got to go. Hey, hey, ho, ho, this lakefront highway's got to go.
More from that song. It starts up north from Hollywood, water on the driver's side, concrete mountains rearing up, throwing shadows just about 5, the song goes. And it's that north branch, Grand to Hollywood, that city and state transportation officials are planning to overhaul. 22 bridges, 12 on and off ramps, 11 neighborhoods.
Improve transit, better access to the lake, and better park experience, also making it safer. And then we also know that we as a city have to improve our infrastructure, repair our aging infrastructure, and also do shoreline protection and climate resiliency.
There's no peace of mind or place you see than riding on Lakeshore Drive. Unless you're approaching the S-curve and you're in a hurry to get to a meeting downtown and all of a sudden traffic slows to a crawl.
Downtown is a disaster in terms of red light stopping, which is insane, but that's not the history. So getting rid of the Chicago Avenue interfaces where you have to have red lights that stop traffic, I think that's the biggest one.
So there's a lot of work to do, and the Chicago and Illinois Departments of Transportation have held public meetings to come up with a final conceptual design for redoing DuSable Lakeshore Drive on the north side. They unveiled it this week. It calls for more green space, easier pedestrian access to the lake, bus-only lanes on some of the ramps, and one less lane each way north of Irving Park. Everybody wins, right?
We ready to let the Illinois Department of Transportation, the Chicago Department of Transportation, Mayor Johnson, and Governor Pritzker that we're saying no to a highway on the lakefront.
All right, not so fast, said about 100 transit and bike enthusiasts, along with a collection of public officials who want to put the brakes on the whole thing. To many of them, redesigning the drive should mean getting rid of it and replacing it with a boulevard with parks and public transit.
This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois to create and literally build and reimagine a different future for our lakefront. We know that we need to see active transportation prioritized in a plan for the future of DuSable Lakeshore Drive. We need to see bus rapid transit lanes at minimum, right? At minimum. The sustainable future for the growth of this great city and this region demands that we build for that growth.
All right, it's not a bad thought, especially for the folks that live along the drive and those that want to relax on the beach without hearing the constant whizzing of cars going by. But then where would all of that car traffic go? This is Chicago after all, and as much as we would love to have a more robust system of alternative transit, people are simply married to their automobiles. Still, transportation officials have a simple goal, a lakefront highway that moves a little swifter and looks a little greener. So where's the money going to come from, and what direction is this project heading? Nobody knows. It's crucial that the city and state get this right, and as the debate between community members, transportation officials, and activists speeds up, I'll just sit back and enjoy the ride and heed the words of the immortal Alyota Haynes and Jeremiah.
And there ain't no road just like it. Anywhere I found, running south on Lakeshore Drive, heading into town, just sneaking on my own LSD, fighting that trouble bound.
Coming up on Paris on Politics.
Tonight, who is Tim Walz? A Minnesota reporter takes us behind the new Democratic VP nominee. One-on-one with Illinois Senator Dick Durbin on the DNC, the future of the Supreme Court, and more. How Illinois abortion providers are coping with a massive influx of new patients, and how 2 historic loop buildings got spared the wrecking ball. Paris on Politics is next.
This is Paris on Politics from Fox 32 Chicago.
Welcome to this week's Paris on Politics, where we go behind the headlines and beyond the spin. The newly minted Democratic ticket barnstormed the Midwest swing states this week as Minnesota Governor Tim Walz settled into the role of Vice President Kamala Harris's running mate. Harris first introduced Walz at a raucous rally in Philadelphia this Tuesday.
These ideas that they're putting out there, they are weird as hell. No one's asking for it. No one's asking for it. We're asking a fair shot. We're asking for health care and child care. We're asking for an education. We're asking for safety in our streets. That's what we're asking for.
And joining us now is Fox 9 Minneapolis-St. Paul reporter Corin Hoggard. Corin, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Tell us about the moment you first found out that Walz was indeed the pick.
We actually were flying to Philadelphia. We left at 7 a.m. our time, and about an hour and a half into the flight, I checked my X feed and saw that indeed our governor was the VP pick of the current VP. So it was an interesting moment. The two guys beside me on either side were sleeping, but there were three women behind me, and they just immediately started chatting about the governor, and they sounded pretty excited. I can say that as soon as we landed in Philadelphia, the people there were also either totally excited about it or had absolutely no idea who Tim Walz was.
It's certainly exciting times for those of you that have covered his administration for a while. You know, his record as congressman has been described as moderate, and then as governor has been described as progressive. Do Minnesotans view him as a hardcore, dyed-in-the-wool progressive?
I'm not exactly sure where they stand. It depends on, your political stripes, honestly. I know that, he won a congressional district, the first congressional district here in Minnesota. That is a traditionally Republican district. He held it for 12 years. Before him, nothing but Republicans. After him, nothing but Republicans. Hillary Clinton in 2016 got 38% there. Tim Walz won his race that year. So yes, absolutely considered a moderate in those days. He, in 2018, ran for governor. At that point, he was still a member of Congress, and that is when the NRA stopped liking him so much. He was getting A's from the NRA. After Parkland, during his campaign for governor, he started speaking out against the NRA, said they were the biggest barrier to some common sense gun control. And since he's been governor, the legislature has passed what he would consider to be some common sense gun reform. So that includes red flag laws and things like that. So I guess, at this point, the liberals kind of see him as middle of the road, but if you are further to the right, you might see him as a progressive. He has actually stepped in and stopped a couple of items that one item that the Minnesota legislature, the liberal and trifecta of the Democrats, legislature has passed. He's also stepped in once to intercede in a prosecution that was being done by a county attorney who is seen as very far left. It's only the second time in state history that has happened. So he has been kind of I don't know if you call it a backstop, but to the furthest left of policies here in Minnesota. So again, the left kind of sees him as the moderate, and I would say the right sees him as quite progressive.
So he hasn't been a rubber stamped, at least for far left legislators and what they want to accomplish in Minnesota. He was relatively obscure to the nation a few weeks ago, obviously not to you, and he rapidly gained notoriety. But we know in politics these things don't happen by accident. So tell us how he positioned himself to be selected for this role.
I think he has this folksy, affable way about him that is very appealing. I know that was one of the things that aides to Kamala Harris said was attractive to putting him on the ticket, was just the way that he gets along with her. It's the same way he seems to get along with just about anybody. He can talk to people of both political stripes and, be friendly with them all. And I think the one thing he did that kind of positioned him to raise his profile nationally might have been somewhat of an accident. In Minnesota, calling somebody weird is considered one of the worst slams you could make on anybody. It's a sick burn here in Minnesota, and when he started calling Donald Trump and J.D. Vance weird, that seemed to catch on social media, and younger people, my daughter, 20 years old, started to notice that, and the memes went from there on TikTok and Threads and places that, I don't really go, but my 20-year-old daughter does.
So the Minnesota nice version of attacking the opponent there. Republicans have attacked his record during the George Floyd riots of 2020, even though there's recent audio that surfaced showing former President Trump praising him. So does some of this criticism, particularly from his counterpart, J.D. Vance, where Vance is saying he, quote, allowed cities to burn down, Does that square with what you remember about his leadership during that time?
Well, I can definitely say that the governor was a day behind what Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey would have preferred for him to step in and order the National Guard in to start helping out and controlling these riots. But it was, unlike what former President Trump has said, it was the governor who stepped in and ordered the National Guard out there. So, you know, it depends on where you stand. Minneapolis definitely had its issues, and the 3rd Precinct Police Department there, they did burn down, and that it will be an issue going forward. I'm sure that J.D. Vance and others on the Republican side will make about Governor Walz and his leadership.
All right, Corin Hoggard, exciting times up there, and lots of stuff for you to cover. I know you're busy turning stories for today, so we really thank you for joining us. Thank you so much. And joining us now to talk about the Harris-Walz ticket, the upcoming DNC, and a political potpourri of topics is Illinois Senior Senator and Chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Senator Dick Durbin. Senator Durbin, thanks for being here.
Good to be here, Paris.
The early returns here, what do you make of them with Tim Walz and what he brings to the Harris ticket?
We feel positive. He's an extraordinary person. You know, former high school teacher and high school coach, member of the National Guard, worked his way up through Congress in a tough congressional district, and then elected governor of Minnesota. He seems like the type of fellow you would like to invite over for a barbecue.
And it seems like that's what sold the nominee Kamala Harris on him at the end of the day. She just got a good feeling on him. The Republican attack so far is that he's dangerously liberal. They're focusing on his support of transgender issues, support of allowing convicted felons to vote. How to respond to those attacks?
We anticipated him. It's exactly the script that they would have used on virtually any choice she made. We're always too liberal, but when it comes down to basic issues, like a woman's access to reproductive health, you know, that's not too liberal. It turns out in conservative states, overwhelmingly, they support our position.
Seems like the math has changed here since Biden dropped out. How do you handicap the race right now, especially in the all-important swing states of the blue wall here in the Midwest?
With so little time left, a matter of 90 days or so, we should never take anything for granted. The numbers are encouraging, but we've got a lot of work to do.
Not just with the White House, but there was worry that with Biden at the top of the ticket, Democrats might lose the Senate and the House. What do the prospects look like in the Senate right now?
Better, and the polls reflect it just in a matter of a week or two. We're seeing numbers that are stronger. Trump is scheduling stops in states that he never would have before. Montana, Donald Trump going to Montana.
It seems like that wouldn't be a swing state.
No, it wouldn't be a swing state unless you're running for the Senate against John Tester. Then you need some help. So it's an indication that we're stronger now than we were before.
Let's talk about the Democratic National Convention, a big moment for Chicago, a big moment for Illinois, a big moment for the Democratic Party. We spoke with Police Superintendent Larry Snelling, who said there's no active threats, CPD's prepared. What are your biggest concerns heading into this all-important week?
I want it to be a positive experience for everyone who comes to Chicago, just like it was in '96 when I chaired the delegation. I want to make sure we keep everybody safe and move them about efficiently and not take anything for granted. I've talked to the Secret Service as well as the FBI, Tammy Duckworth joining this, and been urging them to cooperate with local law enforcement, and I believe they are.
You have protest groups out there saying there could be anywhere from tens to 100,000 protesters here. Is that overstated, or do you anticipate a ton of unrest?
Well, I can't tell. I can tell you that in the last few months, protesters at my condo here in Chicago have closed the street in front of it. They've done that 2 or 3 times.
They were protesting you specifically, or just
me? Yeah.
About Israel,
about the situation with the Palestinians, and I believe in their right to do so. They have to stop short of violence or vandalism, and I just want to make sure that during the convention week we stand by the same standard.
There's been a slowdown of migrant buses sent to Chicago right now, coinciding with a slowdown of border crossings. Do you anticipate Texas Governor Greg Abbott trying to ramp that up to cause chaos somehow?
Well, I hope he doesn't, because it's dangerous, and we don't want anybody to be in trouble or in an unsafe situation. And this sending in buses to any surrounding communities or to Chicago during that week is a provocation.
Up next on Paris on Politics.
I think the fundamental flaw in the Supreme Court now is ethics, for God's sake. Why do these 9 people on the Supreme Court feel they are above the law when it comes to ethics?
The The DNC is in Chicago, and history will be made. Political expert Paris Schutz leads the Fox 32 News team. Convention coverage on air, online, and Fox Local. Inside the United Center or out, when news breaks, turn to Fox 32. Discover Chicago's hidden gems and untold tales.
If you look up, odds are you're seeing our work.
Fox 32's photographers share the stories they've captured with you.
Fountain jet shoots up 150 feet. Our designers, the sky is their canvas.
Streaming now at Fox 32 on Fox Local. Download Fox Local on these streaming platforms and start watching.
You spoke earlier this week about your own political career, that you have not made a decision whether you want to run for Senate again when your term is up. What's going to go into that decision? Does it hinge upon where Democrats, where their power is in the Senate?
There are a lot of factors, but they start with one: my wife and family. You know, I've dedicated my life to public service, and I'm proud of what I've been able to achieve. If I want to go forward with another term, I want it with their full support.
And this decision, I would assume, comes after the November election?
Yes.
Let's talk about some policy, because you chair the Judiciary Committee. You're fully aware of the controversy around the Supreme Court. It's received a lot of scrutiny. President Biden has called it, quote, not normal for many of its recent conservative rulings on abortion and most recently on presidential immunity. Would you characterize it as not normal, as the president has?
I would. Some of these decisions, reversing a 50-year established right of women across America to control their own reproductive health under Roe versus Wade. That is certainly not following precedent, which all of these justices promised that they would. But I think the fundamental flaw in the Supreme Court now is ethics, for God's sake. Why do these 9 people on the Supreme Court feel they are above the law when it comes to ethics? We continue to have reports of lavish vacations provided by billionaires to one particular justice, Clarence Thomas. It keeps coming in through our subpoenas and others. We think the estimated value of $4 million in undisclosed gifts to one Supreme Court justice.
And this is from interest, from folks that might have interest before the court.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's clearly a situation where Clarence Thomas should have stepped aside and never participated in a case that had an impact on these billionaires. And to allow that to happen and not to report it is inexcusable. Inexcusable. They've got to play by the same standards as every other federal judge.
In your own committee is coming out with some of this research where Thomas has not disclosed, Justice Thomas, some of these trips. Is there more recourse? Clearly, it's going to be difficult to haul the justice in for a hearing before the Senate, but what else can you do?
Well, I can tell you one thing that's being done in the Finance Committee, and that's to establish the tax consequence of these lavish gifts of millions of dollars. How much of this was declared as income? How much of this was deducted by any business? These questions are being asked by our Finance Committee, and I think they are spot on.
President Biden proposed reforms, including having each president nominate at least a justice per every 2 years, 18-year term limits, strict ethics guidelines. It seems like with the term limits, it would take a constitutional amendment. Is this pie in the sky, given the makeup of Congress?
It's not going to happen this year, and it isn't going to happen unless the election turns out with majorities for the Democrats in both the House and the Senate that bring about these changes. But in the meantime, the ethics bill that would change the situation I described earlier is pending in the Senate. It should be called for a vote. Let's have Democrats and Republicans go on the record as to whether there should be ethics reform at the highest court.
And give us a rundown of what exactly those ethics guidelines would be.
Well, it basically says that they have to make disclosures, which they have not done in Clarence Thomas's case and others, and as well that there is transparency in their activity and enforcement. If there is an investigation necessary, even at the highest court in the land, they should be held to the same standards as every other official in the federal government.
And folks opposing this might say this is violating the separation of powers. This is getting too close to one branch, perhaps having too much power. What about that?
Well, I think there's a line that should be drawn. We don't want to intimidate the court into a decision, right or left. But when it comes to something as fundamental as a personal gift to the Supreme Court justice and his wife, of a lavish vacation on private jets and private yachts. For goodness sakes, that just offends the sensibilities of most Americans.
And you're saying, Democrats are going to have some pretty sizable majorities in Congress to make some of this happen. Is there any bipartisan buy-in on things like term limits or some of these ethics reforms, given the fact that Republicans are happy with the makeup of the court, 6-3 conservative?
They may like the court, but historically they have joined us in ethics legislation, so it is bipartisan. Now they won't. They won't touch it. They won't even criticize Justice Thomas and his spouse for the vacations and gifts that they've taken. That's inexcusable.
I want to get to some foreign policy issues for you. Iran, as you know, is saber-rattled about retaliation strikes against Israel. Are you privy to any intelligence that says one way or another whether some attacks are imminent?
Well, we have to take this very seriously. Iran is one of our hard targets in this world. They have shown over and over again that they want to defy the United States and Israel. And I certainly don't want to see the war expand in the Middle East. But trading these exchanges back and forth of gunfire and missiles and bombs is just a provocation.
And as you know, Israel and Palestine is a tricky issue for Democrats. You mentioned the protesters outside your condo. How does Iran's involvement complicate your view of Prime Minister Netanyahu and the mass killings of Palestinians undertaken under his leadership?
I'm troubled by that. Some 39,000 innocent people were killed in an effort to stop Hamas. Certainly what they did on October 7th last year, killing 1,200 Israelis, it was brutal, unacceptable, and cannot be defended, I think, by Hamas or any other organization. But having said that, Israel has the right to defend itself, the right to exist, but there should be limits, and they should draw the line when they go too far.
I want to ask you another foreign policy issue. Venezuela had recent elections. Socialist dictator Maduro is claiming victory despite mountains of evidence that the opposition leader, more pro-democracy leader, won. Should the U.S. recognize the opposition as the legitimate government of Venezuela?
I think it's possible that we will and we should. Nicolas Maduro is a tyrant, an autocrat, and has run fixed election after fixed election. I was in Venezuela in Caracas and met with him before the previous election 4 or 5 years ago and told him, if you don't have international observers and somebody to validate the results, nobody's going to believe you that you won the election. He didn't do it. I think in this situation, there was overwhelming public sentiment for change, and he's ignoring that, and I don't think we should recognize him as a rightful leader.
You don't think that the country should? The Biden administration has still not taken that step. What do you think it'll take for the administration to do what you're saying here?
I'm not privy to all of the arrangements between the United States and Venezuela, so I really hesitate to make a judgment on that. But I will tell you, if you're asking me whether I bet this was a valid election, I bet it wasn't.
What is the role of the United States in meddling in politics and government in Venezuela, especially given the fact that this impacts Chicago, this impacts many cities across the country, because it's Venezuelans overwhelmingly that are crossing the border now and coming here?
If the Venezuelans are not credibly led by a leader that they've elected and have an opportunity for a decent life in their country, it is no surprise that the vast majority of them are fleeing to nations like Colombia and even the United States. So we have a vested interest in this, and I don't believe Maduro is playing straight with us.
All right, lots to watch on that front. And T-minus less than 2 weeks until the Democratic National Convention in your home state, the state of Illinois. We look forward to seeing you then and all the coverage, and thanks for joining us here.
Thanks, Paris.
Up next on Paris on Politics.
Abortion takes center stage in Illinois.
Is it going to be a lot of hard work? Yes, but we are ready. We always have been, and this is what the moment calls for.
How did the leader of a small village become known as the worst mayor in America?
She cannot continue to intimidate and gangster her way through this.
From showy billboards and expensive police bodyguards to Vegas trips and retaliation allegations, we bring you an inside look into Mayor Tiffany Henyard and the drama in Dolton. Streaming now at Fox 32 on Fox Local. Search Fox Local on these streaming platforms. Download and watch today. Chicago Sports Insiders.
I am so excited. This is gold right now. It's gold.
Streaming now on your smart TV at Fox 32 on Fox Local, your home of the Bears team.
Every Bears game will be must-see TV.
Following every step of a historic season.
Hardcore on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Download Fox Local and get in the game now.
Touchdown, Bears!
Search Fox Local on these streaming platforms and start watching today.
Abortion and reproductive rights took center stage in Illinois this week. Governor Pritzker signed a trio of laws protecting access for Illinois and out-of-state residents.
These laws were crafted to shield Illinoisans from future attacks by the U.S. Supreme Court and other bad actors who will attempt to impose their backward ideology on the rest of us.
So the bills would protect out-of-state residents who come to Illinois from more restrictive states and preserve emergency access to abortion should federal laws weaken. This all comes as Illinois and the nation has seen an uptick in abortions since the Supreme Court Dobbs decision. I asked Personal PAC's Sarah Garza-Resnick how Illinois providers are dealing with the demand.
Just in 2023, 37,000 people had to come to Illinois to receive abortion care from banned states. That means that they had to leave their families, their jobs, their healthcare providers that they know, the comfort of their own home, just to receive life-saving essential healthcare. And so providers have had to add more employees. They've had to increase their hours, increase their shifts, but they are meeting the need that we are seeing here in Illinois because they are very dedicated healthcare providers.
Will Illinois be able to continue to handle the influx of folks from out of state as new laws go into effect? For instance, in Iowa, where a 6-week abortion ban just went into effect.
Chicago Abortion Fund, which provides wraparound services for people that need help getting here and receiving the care they need, has seen over 80 calls from Iowa just this week. That's an over 250% increase from previously. I know that we're going to be able to meet the need. Not only do we have activists on the ground, but we have tremendous leaders like Governor Pritzker and Attorney General Kwame Raoul and our pro-choice supermajority legislators in the Illinois House. I have no doubt that we are going to be able to meet the need. Is it going to be a lot of hard work? Yes, but we are ready. We always have been. And this is what the moment calls for.
Finally tonight, a pair of endangered and historic loop buildings is spared the wrecking ball for now. They're crumbling and need some tender love and affection and new tenants. I asked Ward Miller of Preservation Chicago why the Century and Consumers buildings at 201 South State Street deserve to be protected.
Yeah, these are two incredible buildings of the Chicago School of Architecture. They are the last of those buildings constructed before World War I, which ended that period in time. These are early skyscraper buildings. They're by William LeBaron Jenny Mundy and Jensen, the father of the skyscraper, and also Halliburton and Roche. These were early firms that really set a high bar and standard for what would later become or recognized as skyscraper buildings. One is from 1913, one is from 1915. These have been owned by the General Services Administration, basically the federal government, for almost 20 years, and they've been falling into disrepair during that whole time. There's now a $52 million earmark to demolish these structures. And it's really sad because we've been advocating for these for more than a decade to be reused, and that was the promise when they acquired these buildings back in 2005, that they would reuse these for federal offices and restore them.
Let me ask you, what are the tenants that you're looking at that could come into the building? What are the odds that you're successful?
Well, the tenants that we're looking at are archives, basically, and museum pieces, really. But we're thinking of the Chicago Collaborative Archives Center as a place to bring these collections from around the nation. Some of them predate the formation of the United States to Chicago and in these two buildings. And the reason for that is that archives are light sensitive. So any windows that would be problematic could be sealed off from the interior side of the buildings, not impacting their visual qualities from the exterior. And we think this could be really a marvelous idea. We have a number of religious archives that have already signed on with the idea of being tenants in this structure. They're already coming to Chicago from other places around the nation. It's just a challenging thing after 20 years to, with very little maintenance, to be able to bring these buildings back and to work with a team of developers and architects and engineers, and of course many tenants, to make this a reality. But we're going to make it, we're going to try to make it a reality best we can.
Miller says preservationists have about 90 days to make their case to the federal government. And that's our show for this week. Join us next week as we break down all things Democratic National Convention. And stay tuned to Fox 32 Chicago on air and online for all of the latest breaking news. Enjoy the Air and Water Show and be safe this weekend. So long, everyone.
The DNC is in Chicago, and history will be made. Political expert Paris Schutz leads the Fox 32 News team. Convention coverage on air, online, and Fox Local. Inside the United Center or out. When news breaks, turn to Fox 32. An inside look into Mayor Tiffany Henyard and the drama in Dalton. Streaming now at Fox 32 on Fox Local. Search Fox Local on these streaming platforms. Download and watch today.